All right, audience, settle down, settle down. Welcome into another episode of the Young Dad Podcast. I'm Jay, and joining me today is Sophie Schauermann. Sophie, how are you today?
I'm good. It's early here in Colorado, but it's been awesome to connect with you even for a few moments and talk about both being in the behavioral mental health field and parents. And I'm just really grateful that you are having me here today.
I'm super grateful that you're here. It's early over here in Washington State, too.
Yeah.
But early bird gets the worm, right? Early bird gets a good recording. This is where I feel my ideas are best. They come a little slower, but they're a little bit more filtered and they're a little bit more thought out at this time in the morning. So,
Yeah, and it's in my mom body, it's more like midday because I had a 5 a.m. wake up from my stepson and a lot has
okay.
already and another meeting, like a lot has already happened today. I feel like
Yeah,
there's like
you're
multiple
already
days in one day.
Yeah, that's so relatable, especially when you have a 3-year-old that wakes up at I don't even know what hour of the night sometimes. She's almost done potty training. She's almost gotten it down to where she needs to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. So she's on like 5 out of 7 nights a week where she either gets up or she wakes up dry. Then there's a couple nights where she just wakes up, comes in my room holding her underwear and her pajama pants,
Oh,
just up. She's not crying. She's just coming to let me know that she peed herself.
oh,
And
she wants to let you know.
yeah,
Yep.
she just wanted to let me know. And so it's like, okay, just go to the bathroom and go lay back down in bed. So, but
There's
eventually
really
after that,
there's, yeah, there's really important information that needs to be shared in the middle of the night. I think my stepson this morning just needed to let us know that his stuffies had fallen off his bed.
oh
And
no,
we yeah, it was important that we knew that.
yeah, you gotta
Tragic.
know, you gotta know. But so
I know.
it's tragic. It's
I
rough
know.
for people, like kids.
I know.
But Sophie, a little about you for the listeners if they skipped over the intro. I'm guilty of skipping over intros on podcasts. Never yours though, never yours.
Thank you.
Um, you believe pineapple goes on pizza. You're a wife, a stepmom, mom, a sister, therapist, and you're also a holistic parenting coach. So please tell myself, the people, how you got started on your journey of holistic parent coaching, your motherhood journey, and just how. Also, you're the co-host of Sisterhood meets Motherhood. If you couldn't tell by the intro, that's kind of where she's coming from. But tell us about how you got started on this journey, your motherhood journey got started, and a little bit about rooted rhythm therapy as well.
Absolutely. A lot of things are happening. I think my journey as a therapist and a parent coach came from my own journey as a sensitive person. I was a super sensitive, intuitive, anxious little girl, and for a long time felt sort of confused about who I was because I did feel so deeply. And that led to my own struggles with mental health, which I share in different ways on our podcast, Sisterhood Meets Motherhood, the podcast I have with my sister-in-law, which we can talk a little bit more about later. But I'm so grateful for the journey into the depths that I went through because as I healed and grew and became the most authentic version of myself, I knew from when I was 17 or 18 that I wanted to be a therapist. And I went to undergrad at Tufts in Boston and pretty much got like a graduate degree as an undergraduate studying child development in a lab school where I would literally get to, like, from day one, observe kids on the playground and write papers about how they're interacting. And there was also a clinical psych program there, which had me in a practicum placement in undergrad, working at a
Oh wow!
pretty severely, like, with like a population that was pretty severely suffering in East Boston in a day program. I got to work with the Harvard Mental Health Lab for children, studying cognitive behavioral techniques for different emotional things. And then eventually landed in grad school to become a master's social worker, and just a journey of figuring out, knowing that I've been a therapist since day one, but figuring out who I am and how I work with clients. I did a little bit of work in the agency world and in schools as a school-based and home-based and outpatient therapist. And then as I became fully licensed, I realized that in order to do the work to the depths that I believe children can really grow, not just survive, like not just cope and have their parents feel okay, but to like really be understood and seen and go through deep healing to feel more understood and whole. I needed to support kids in a private practice setting. So as I stepped into private practice, and along that time, I became a certified play therapist. So I really had a modality of child-centered play therapy, which could be a whole podcast in itself of discussing what that
Oh,
is.
100%.
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
play therapy. I'm a big believer in play therapy, art therapy, and just
totally,
sensory-based therapy approaches. I'm a huge fan. Huge fan. Huge
totally.
believer in those.
The short of it is that kids will communicate to you through play, not words. So if we give them space to play out what's happening inside, they can just process a lot more effectively. But what I developed that I think is different than a lot of my colleagues is that I realized pretty quickly that I need to work really closely with the parents in order for real change to happen. So, equally as important to our play therapy process, which happens actually in set containers over 12 weeks, where we can go really deep, but not necessarily be the child's long term attachment figure. We want their parents to be that. So, me and my team of therapists work really hard to bridge the space between the child's heart and subconscious pains and struggles and triumphs with the parents' heart and consciousness. And so we just work really closely to help parents understand what's happening for their child through what they're communicating to us through the play, and then do their own inner work and healing to see how they can increase their capacity to hold what the child's going through. And there's so much more I could say, but all of that is to say it's a really depth oriented and holistic approach to supporting parents and their children. And I'm super excited. Just over the last few months, we've actually expanded our practice to Atlanta, Georgia, Dallas, Texas, and Greenwich, Connecticut, in addition to Denver. So our team of therapists that are learning how to support kids in a rooted and rhythmic way is growing, and really excited about all of that. And then when it comes to the podcast with my sister-in-law, I married my husband. We've been together 3.5 years. We got married last summer. We actually met to run a conscious parenting group. I've been in this space for a while, and he was having a career shift from being a bookkeeper at a hospital to a therapist. Like, he realized that he really wanted more. And we were introduced because he was interested in conscious parenting. I think I tell our story throughout the podcast, but yeah, we I think grew together really quickly. He was in the process of getting divorced. I had no interest in I was like, that with the work I do, that sounds like a lot to be with someone who's like shifting careers and has children. But turns out I fell in love with him and his kids. And along the way, um, it was an amazing bonus that his sister became one of my best friends in the world, Kendra. And I mean, our podcast, Sisterhood Meets Motherhood, really shows the connection that we have. And like, the easiest thing that I've created in all of this has been that podcast. It's been like so effortless. We just were getting our nails done last summer and chatting, and we realized that the other women in the salon were listening to our conversation, and it was like we had like no shame. We were like, I think we were both crying about whatever was happening in our life at the time, and
Mhm.
we realized maybe we should just broadcast these conversations. Maybe it could support people to feel as entrepreneurs and moms and just in our messiness, what if we just shared? And we just started recording our conversations, and we don't have anyone like helping us do it. We just like, I'm sure you too, like it's like a self-guided thing. We just figured out how to upload it and push audio together. And now it's kind of like our therapy when we get to come together and have these conversations.
Yes, 100%. So I love that. I love what you do for like work because I'm in the same field as I've talked about on the show multiple times. And it's so interesting because when I work a lot closer with the parents than I do the youth for most of my families on my caseload. And so when I actually see a full on conscious change by the parent or by the caregivers, and they're actually like doing the work and they're actually like participating. They're actually trying to make the changes. Like, I have one grandma. She's an old Scottish lady, and she's hilarious. She's the best. But when I first took over that case and whatnot, she was like, "Oh," I'm like, I told her we're gonna get along great. We're gonna have a good time. She's like, "Oh, we'll see." And it's the very first time it was just so negative. It was so hard to get to her. It was so hard just to talk to her because she was so just like, it's the kid, it's the kid, it's the kid, it's the kid. When all she really needed was just like some psychoeducation. She needed to understand these different diagnoses and what they meant for her youth and how to just understand them. And then with that, she was able to realize, oh, I need to pick my battles more. But also, this isn't her talking right now. This is related to her one disorder, or this is related to that. So I got to breathe. Can't get mad at her for this because this is just
Yeah.
how she is. I just have to accept that and love that. And once she started doing that, it's been nothing but positive. They
Yeah.
communicate, they talk, they get along. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. So parents, it's so important for you guys, if your kid's having behaviors, or not always, but a lot of the time, there's a correlation there between the parents and the youth that are struggling to understand, like, hey, it's also me. There's something I need to work on too. With here with my
Yeah.
parenting as well. At least my experience personally, but love what
Absolutely.
you said, as well about your
Ah.
podcast, how it kind of just started as conversations. Like mine and my brothers, how we started this one is we would be playing video games. So we'd be playing Madden or 2K or Modern Warfare. We'd be playing just games online, and it actually was during toward the end of my marriage where we really started doing it more often, having just hours of conversation, talking, gaming. My kid was already in bed, it was before my second one was born, and we would just do it. We would talk, be like, dude, this would be, it's be such a cool podcast, be so fun to do something like that. And then I got divorced, and then my whole world kind of blew up. I didn't do anything creative for, I don't know, maybe a year and a half. I did nothing creative. And then about a year ago, it's been a little bit more than a year, probably about a year and a half now by the time this episode actually comes out, of doing this podcast and where the idea came from. So it kind of just happened. It's a lot of fun, but it's self-guided, and it's so important to take the steps. And I'm a big fan of play therapy and introducing that because it's so important to. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy, but it's so important. I have to grab this little one because he's
He's
the
a cutie.
instigator with the big dog. He's the instigator. So with that, you have to play therapy is one of my favorite things because it gives, and I think it's really good for adults to engage in as well. Like I've had sessions with parents where we'll play a game, and it'll be a game, and I'll ask specific questions, or I'll do certain things. Like if we're playing Uno, for example, I'll try to do something or like cheat or something just to see their reaction and see how they get upset or whatnot. So you can do a lot of really cool things through play and through play therapy and
Totally.
get a lot out. One of the therapists I work with, he has his office set up with a shelf. He has some really cool like figurines and whatnot on the top, but as soon as kids come in and they reach for them, it's like, oh, you can't touch those, as those are off limits. You can't touch those. And he does it on purpose because he wants to see how they're going to react to being told no.
Mm-hmm.
So then that
And
opens up the doorway to the conversation of,
totally.
So it just flows into the next thing. But
Yeah.
for you in your journey, and the other thing I wanted to mention here is you sounded just like my now fiance, because she had the same thoughts. She's a preschool teacher, and my oldest daughter was in her class a couple years ago, and then after that school year, she left preschool, went to kindergarten. So she was no longer in the class, and then slid into her DMs at the end of the school year. But that was kind of where she was too. She was like, I don't have kids. I'm, really into my work as a teacher, and I don't know about this. Like,
Yeah.
she was just so against it for a while, and then eventually we just fell for each other. I got her to fall for me. she loves me, she
How
loves the
does
kids,
she how does she get along with your girls?
Oh, I think it really helped that she knew my older one
Mhm.
and had her in her class for a year.
Mhm.
So I think that was really beneficial just to the situation, and then, she didn't really know the baby because the baby was a bit really little. She was, like, 1
Yeah.
when
Mhm.
the other one was in preschool, so, but she gets along with the girls great. The girls love her. My older one loves her because I mean, it's someone she already knew.
Mhm.
Um, so it's a really easy transition into kinda like life and with my co-parent, with their mom because it's like, "Oh, okay, I know this person already, so
Mhm.
no bad flags here, no red flags here." So, it's been really good. We got engaged about 2 months ago at the
Congrats.
time of this recording,
Mhm.
so maybe we'll be married or something by the time this actually comes out, who knows? But,
Mhm.
um, yeah, super fun times. But no, I was like, "That sounds familiar." Um,
Yeah,
but it's really
yeah,
fun.
yeah, being a step parent is the hardest thing I've ever done, but so rewarding, and it's really nice to feel the process of, like, closeness and then not sure, and all of us really choosing each other. But when we got married last summer, I, shared vows to my now husband and my stepkids, and
Mm.
it was, like, so sweet. I, like, made, yeah, commitments and agreements with them, and the little one who was 4 at the time, like, I don't know how much he took in. The older one was actually, like, hugging us and crying with us, even though there's been, it's a journey for her too, because she knows what it was like to have mom and dad together and misses that chapter in her life. But I know, like, yeah, it was just a really cool process of, like, sharing my commitment to them too, because when you become a step parent, you're not just committing to your spouse, you're committing to one or two or however many other little souls too. And yeah, they definitely, like, I know that day was an energetic, really important shift for all of us.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's healing for my older daughter. Obviously, my
Mhm.
little one, she's grown up in the divorce. I mean, she was 5 months old when we split. So she
Mhm.
was real little. We split in April 21. She was born November 20. Um, so she's grown up with it, the last 2.5 years or whatever that is now. But the older
Mhm.
one, she grew up with us together
Mhm.
and she's had a lot of changes. Like the dog that she grew up with passed away 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, and then she still, holds on to the collars and the leashes and has them in her
Mhm.
bed with her of the old dog
Oh.
and whatnot. But I think it's really positive for her to kind of see because her mom moved on right
Mhm.
away.
Mhm.
But for me, this is the most committed relationship I've been in since
Mhm.
my divorce, and I think it's really healing for her just to see me happy and to see
Mhm.
that dynamic shift again and to have that energy and whatnot and to not see
Mhm.
me just kind of there and struggling or not have all the energy
Yeah.
needed to support them and what they need. And then they have another person that they love and play with and are supported by. I'm pretty much
Mhm.
chopped liver now, but
Mhm. That's awesome. Yeah, it's such a different and unique journey for any parent that's going through divorce and other relationships and blending with the kids. And but I think that it's kind of the percentage of how many families are blended now is really high. And I also work with a lot of families that are what's the word, like, just not blended, the nuclear family. Both parents are the biological parents to the children, and they have their own sets of challenges. So I just try to think about, like, no matter what family dynamic you might be in, there's, like, challenge and benefit to the um circumstances.
so I wanted to ask you about a little bit more because your therapy is very focused. You mentioned it, but working with like highly sensitive children and also conscious parenting. So break it
Totally.
down for me. What is conscious
Mhm.
parenting? I don't know.
Ah,
I know, but what is conscious parenting like for the listeners? Break it down for them, and then also what it means to them to be able to recognize if they have a highly sensitive child.
ah. The recording just cut out for a moment, but I think I got it. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. We're good.
Okay.
All that silence will come out later. So
Okay, awesome. So, yeah, I do specialize in highly sensitive children. I didn't always label my practice as such, but when I look back on the thousands of kids that I've supported in the playroom, I started to identify that they all have a sort of unique temperament in that they're really deep feelers. Sometimes that's internalized, like anxiety or negative self-talk or thoughts. Sometimes that's externalized with like anger or defiance, but I I seemed to attract kids that just like felt really deeply and seemed to pick up energy from their environments that wasn't always theirs. And who were generally misunderstood or misdiagnosed when as they were moving through the healing process and growing and learning how to create boundaries and respect boundaries and regulate, they actually really thrived. I knew that there needed to be more than just a diagnosis like from the diagnostic manual for these kids. And as I started to dive deeper into some research, I found Dr. Elaine Aron's work on the highly sensitive child. And it's like decades of research on um, what she's found to be 15 to 20% of the population who just feel more deeply. She breaks it down into a few different categories. And there's like, if you dive into any of my content, I have like a bigger transformational course or even just a mini course on understanding the highly sensitive child. I share like research studies and like really what's happening in the brain, but the components of the sensitive person are a depth of processing. So there's like just for the sensitive person, if they're in a room with people, they're like in a really deep way processing more than the non-sensitive person. And quite literally, the thalamus in the brain, which is the gatekeeper to information, is allowing in more information than the non-sensitive person. There's a pattern of being overstimulated easily, which in other words, like outbursts and overwhelm, but that's also because so much information is coming in. There's patterns of being emotionally responsive and empathetic. So another way of saying kind of like emotionally reactive, but there's also high levels of empathy. Not always in young kids. Empathy really develops around age 8, but when it is developed, it's like bigger and stronger and they feel others' pain. And then there's an ability to sense the subtle. So sensitive kids will pick up on tension between parents who are fighting, chaos in the world. Like with my sensitive stepdaughter, I knew she was feeling it at the time of this recording. War has just broken out in Israel, and I knew I have family there, and like have had a weekend of like real depth of processing and concern and sadness for the whole situation. And I knew she was feeling it. So, like in her case, I had to, like, it was just a parenting choice to actually explain to her what was going on in an age appropriate way. And it was like by actually sharing the truth of what was happening for me internally, she just like totally grounded. But I think when we don't share, when we don't meet the depths that sensitive kids are like experiencing their world, there can be just a lot of top layer symptoms. So, our work when it comes to how we support children, but then also how we teach parents to understand their children, is really focused on these children and the like classic parenting scripts and go to Instagram techniques don't work for those kids because they can see right through it. They're like, wait, what? You're like reading a script, mom. I teach parents like how to really energetically set boundaries, how to reduce any shame from their parenting because sensitive kids hold shame and vulnerability like right next to each other and like will just shut down if they feel any shaming kind of discipline. But at the same time, I teach the importance of boundaries for sensitive kids because they need to know the limits. It's dysregulating not to know the limits. And then I also teach parents like how to consciously attune to their sensitive child in a way that they can feel, which isn't always easy. Sometimes attuning to your sensitive child is like playing a game where you feel like you're just doing wrong the whole time because that's how they're feeling or whatever. I just teach that attunement doesn't necessarily look like skipping in the field of flowers. And then sometimes you get those moments because sensitive kids have big pendulum swings from like darkness and everything's horrible to like it's the best day of my life. And so I also help parents set realistic expectations of what those swings might look like for their children. And then when it comes to conscious parenting, it's really, to me, conscious parenting is just parenting with awareness and parenting while on the path of personal growth. So it means like being willing to look at your subconscious and look at your shadow parts and own your own triggers. So when your child's behavior is triggering you, there's something inside of you that needs to grow and shift and is really a gift for you to increase your capacity to meet life. And when we're pointing our finger at the child and making them wrong, I just believe we're looking in the wrong place and it's not even effective. So I attract parents to my work that are ready to turn the finger back on themselves and look at like when my 5-year-old is like freaking out with anger, where have I not set clear boundaries? Where do I not um feel comfortable with anger and feel scared of it, and then I push my child away and then they get more angry. Whatever it is, like what can I shift as parent to increase my capacity to hold the anger, and then we actually see easier emotional expression for the child. But when I used to work in the more of the mental health system and community-based care, our treatment plans like over and over again would have to say like supporting emotional regulation, and now my treatment plans say like we're supporting healthy emotional expression because our sensitive kids need to express and they need to feel, but we teach them how to move it through and honor the wisdom of their feelings instead of um, squashing it down.
I love that because you're exactly right, because it's when we talk emotional regulation, it is squashing it down.
Mm-hmm.
Even for less sensitive children, we tell them just to regulate and to breathe or to use A, B, or C coping skill to bring yourself back down, but it doesn't get it out. There's no outlet for it. So then it just stays in and it's still there. All that
Mm-hmm.
energy's still within your body. It's not coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a lot of boys in the program, a lot of young boys in the program, and some of them are very highly physical and
Mm-hmm.
highly outbursty and destructive, and um, they're violent. That's the other word I was looking for. And so for them, it almost doesn't make sense for us to be like you just mentioned. I'm putting it together in real time here, but it doesn't make sense for us to teach emotional coping skills versus being able to help them find a way to express that in a healthy manner, because that's more what
Yeah,
they need. They need to get it out.
what I do with those boys when I haven't had one in a while, but when my favorite exercise with those kinds of kiddos are we take a glass plate and we write on the plate like everything that pisses them off, cuss words, whatever you want, and then we put it into pillowcases and we go outside and smash it, and like it's like there's space for it and it's okay to have that feeling. But then I also open the bag and I say like, you see those shards of glass, when you throw those on your brother, you're like being really dangerous and you're like hurting him, even if it's just words. So like break your glass, but be responsible in how you throw it away. And then we like actually go and we responsibly throw it away. So it's like the feeling isn't wrong. There's space for it. And as you're like cussing out the world and writing in Sharpie, like all the things you have like every right to be angry about, I'm like totally beside you in it. And I'm also here to help you like connect with what boundaries you need to learn to set in your life to like not have to hold the usually it's like other people's in their lives pain that's now living in their system, and it's still your responsibility because it lives inside your body of like where like who it touches and how. But that's the
100%.
difference between like experiential process and just like sitting down with a worksheet to try to tell the child what you should think instead of feeling angry.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not a. I think worksheets are effective for some kids. They're not
Mm-hmm.
effective for others. I think it helps kids who are really having a hard time verbalizing it, help
Mm-hmm.
them create a baseline or think about it to start the conversation. One of the other therapists I work with, one of the kids we have together, he does. He's been trying to introduce just worksheets just to get the conversation started about grief or what's making them angry or different things like that, to try to start working through them. And those are effective because he writes a lot in those on those sheets. Um, and thinking about it, when you mentioned the pillowcase and writing things down that piss you off, a few weeks ago, and also this last weekend, I went and spoke. I we have this thing called Washington State Community Connectors. It's like this big organization and whatnot. It's a statewide thing. And I went and spoke, and I presented a workshop at the last thing they had. They invited me to come to a workshop. My workshop for that was on my website. It's called the Well Balanced Dad Diet. I just changed dad to
Oh,
parent.
cool.
And part of that, towards the end, a lot of that I talk about forgiveness. Talk about
Mhm.
forgiving yourself as a parent, forgiving yourself, forgiving others, forgiving your kid. So one activity I have them do during that workshop is, so they each get a paper bag, they write tool bag on it, and as we talk, I ask them to put like different big tools that they're really strong at. Those are bigger pieces of paper. They write it down, they put it in a tool bag. Smaller tools that they're getting that they want to work on, they put those in the tool bag as well. But they're still tools they can use. They're just not big ones. So they know kind of where
That's
their
amazing.
strengths and where their needs are from that. But with that, towards the end, I have them write down on a different piece of paper something that something that they need to let go of, that they need to forgive, that they need to physically just, that's just bogging them down. They
Mhm.
know it. And so I have them consciously do that. They write it down on that piece of paper, they bundle it up, and then at the end of the workshop, they throw it in the trash. And they
Mm,
physically let go of that because there's something with that. Actually, it was a friend of mine. After my divorce, we went down to the river because I live right
mhm,
next to the Columbia River here in the Tri Cities in Washington. So we went down. It was a summer night. Took two Sharpies and we went down to the river and we rode on rocks.
mhm,
And so this is where the idea came from. And we just rode on rocks, just whatever we wanted to just physically let go of.
mhm,
Whatever
mhm,
was there. There's a lot of crying. There's a lot of tears, mostly me,
mhm,
because this was
mhm,
like within a month of my divorce, so it was very fresh and it was hard. But there was just something about that, and I understand why now. But being able to physically write it out, put it in your hand, and then for your body to feel like you're physically letting it go,
mhm, mhm,
because
totally.
you.
It's so important to do the like, just yet to be in the ritual of the release and not just in our heads, and that's the whole premise of play therapy and any trauma therapy that I think actually works. It's like we're getting below the conscious mind because the things that hurt us are in the subconscious mind, and when we actually, like leave the talking zone and go more into, like, the experiential release or whatever it is,
Mhm.
like, so many powerful things happen. I talk in, like one episode recently about within our Sisterhood Meets Motherhood podcast about the miscarriage that I had over the summer. And like, just, I think if it hasn't come out yet, it will soon. But yeah, I think it recently came out. And I think we were talking, I think it was in the forgiveness episode, but I know we did one on forgiveness. But just the like, I could talk about it, but it was like really going into the woods with same kind of thing with my husband and like releasing the soul and in gratitude to what moved through us, that where like the real integration and completion of that event happened. And so yeah, I'm just so for like experiential and active ways of healing and growing. And I also love that exercise sounds amazing. I love how you're encouraging parents to like also look what's happening in their system and what are they holding that's taking up space in their consciousness that will impact their parents. And especially for the sensitive, empathetic, tuned in kids that I work with, they're picking up on everything. So it's just, yeah, I feel like even more important than kids coming to play therapy is their parents going to therapy to have their space to move through things and release and keep their there's a Gabor Mate quote: children swim in the waters of your subconscious, it's best you keep the waters clean. um and so yeah, I think in just to sum it up, like conscious parenting is being a steward to to the waters of your subconscious as a parent.
100%. And I'm so sorry that you and your husband experienced that process, that loss of a miscarriage. I spoke in depth about that on an episode. I believe it was episode 40, 48, or 49 with Kelly Jean. He hosts the Welcome to Fatherhood podcast, and he also released the Miscarriage Dad podcast.
Oh wow.
And super powerful. Him and his wife, and he shared the story with me, but I won't go in. You can listen to the podcast episode to get more. That's for the listeners.
Yeah.
Go back to episode 48. It's clearly labeled, but he talked about how him and his wife had two miscarriages.
Mhm.
had a child,
Mhm.
2 more miscarriages, and
Wow.
another child. So they've experienced it several times. And now the second one, they're done. Um,
It's
but
got goosebumps. Yeah, totally.
it's something that just weighs on you. Personally, I haven't experienced that. God willing, I don't. But if it does happen, it does. But um, it's deep. It's hard. It's not easy. It's a two-way street. There's a part of it, of course, for you as a mother, because that's something that's happening within your body to your body. So it's emotional and physical for you, but there's also the
Mhm.
side of it for the male as well that needs to have that part of it as well, to that space to get through it, to talk about it, to work through it, to because it's a loss on both ends.
Mhm. Totally.
And
It's a journey.
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love how you talk about being a steward of the waters and that unconscious mind, tapping into that unconscious mind, because that's where the trauma's formed.
Mhm.
It's the traumatic events may have happened. We may not remember them, but our
Mhm.
brain's going to remember them. The wrinkles in our brain have been created now to where smells or
Mhm.
colors or sights or someone's hair color, someone's voice tone, someone's,
Mhm.
the color of their shirt, color of their hair, the length
Mhm.
of their hair, whatever it might be, however
Mhm.
the trigger might be, it's still going to be there. But that's what's in the
Mhm.
unconscious mind, which I think is so important through play therapy to get through to that deeper level, because you need
Mhm.
to tap into that
Absolutely.
unconscious mind, because that's where it is. And it's super important for us as parents, we're able to, and adults, we're able to do that a little bit easier. It's hard,
Mhm.
it's really hard, but
Mhm.
getting into that unconscious mind, we have to go. I find myself, at least for me in my experience, in my personal experience, I have to ask myself why a lot.
Mhm.
Why am I feeling
Mhm.
this? Okay, I can relate back to that. Why am I feeling it this way? Because of this. Okay, I'm feeling it because of this way. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to backtrack in my own mind where this is coming from,
Mhm.
why, where this is coming from. And then I'm really able to tap in a little bit deeper. It's like, okay, I am feeling this way because when I was 4 years old, my biological mother, for example, something in the past, my biological mother promised me a gift.
Mhm.
And so that gift never came. And then it happened again when I was 7, it happened again when I was
Mhm.
10. So
Mhm.
fast forward all the way to today, I have a really hard time receiving gifts
Mhm.
because I don't know if it's for
You
real,
don't
if it's
know if
actually
it's
going to
real.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah, like, you don't know if you can trust it, that it's there, like, it'll stay, or if it's real. Yeah, it's a real thing. I mean, I how do I say this? Like, in some ways where I am in my work, like, I think we can also, like, overanalyze every moment and be like, where in my childhood did this come from? And it's funny coming from a child therapist that is focused on doing inner child work with people. So I also like in so but I think as the conscious parent, you can like be have your arms open and holding and hugging all the younger parts of yourself in any moment.
Mhm.
Like, so you're like, oh, this is like that's just my inner 6-year-old speaking, but that we stay empowered and not then being in like the victim story of like, well, my little girl's hurting and my child's triggering it. Like, I think that's the parent coaching piece versus the therapy piece for me is I'm coaching parents to choose an empowered stance and own their
Yes.
stuff. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so, like, and it's just the awareness. Like, I was having a grumpy moment with my stepson the other day because I felt like um I don't even remember what, like he wasn't listening or something. And I know I was a little bit grumpier than usual. And I turned to my husband and I was like, I know I'm projecting right now, but it's just all I got. It's like at least I have the awareness of like I'm projecting some of my overwhelm. And my opinion is as long as there's repair, like pretty quickly after my stepson and I like got super connected and I said like that was all me. Like that was me feeling impatient. Like you're not doing anything wrong, then we can like keep the waters of the relationship really clean and clear. But I just think that forgiveness piece and the self-love piece as parents is everything because it's freaking hard. Like and we all have like purposes and passion and work to do in the world. And it's a double, triple time job to be a parent. And then you don't get sleep or whatever it is. And so I feel like if we could all just like give ourselves a hug and a pat on the back and be okay with there's a term, the good enough parent, like being the good enough parent, then we can relax into enjoying time with our kids more.
100%. And I think it's important to also realize that good enough looks like a day where you have 25% to give and you give
Yeah.
all your 25%. Or it
Yeah.
looks like a day where you have 96% and you gave all 96%.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, that's what it looks
Yeah.
like. It's not always giving when you only have 25, giving 100, because that 75 that
Yeah.
you're trying to give is going to be awful. It's going to be bad. It's going to be real bad.
Yeah.
It's not going to work, but
That's what Kendra, my sister-in-law, she literally said that last week. She was like, if you give 25% of the 25% you have, that's 100%. It's like
100%.
that's
I
going to
think she listened to
100%.
my I think she listened to my podcast. She stole that from
Oh,
me.
really? Okay, that's
Tell her
awesome.
she stole that from me. Tell her she stole that from me.
Okay,
Maybe she
okay, okay.
didn't, but I'm pretty sure she did. But
Great minds think alike, or she stole it from you. I'll tell her either one.
she probably stole it from me. It's cool. It's
Okay,
fine.
okay. That's cool.
Nothing's
She
trademarked,
didn't put
but
it on our podcast. This was like a personal
oh,
Sophie
okay,
message. It wasn't on the
that's
podcast
fine.
as her own. Yeah.
She can put it on the podcast. That's fine. It's not my
Okay.
original
Well,
idea. I heard it somewhere else, but
totally.
it's true. Give as much as you can give. If 25%, and the same with your relationship with your partner as well. I heard this. I think it was from, I don't remember who. It's the guy that hosts Family Feud.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember. Steve Harvey.
Okay.
He said that he has some really good quotes and some really good relationship advice. But one thing he said is that he said really early on in him and his wife's relationship, they realized that when they had kids and whatnot, they would sit down and be like, "How much do you have today?" She would say, "I got 25%. I got you covered."
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Mm-hmm.
"You got this much. I got you covered." I was like, "Oh, I only got 20."
Mm-hmm.
And so they would have to figure out a plan to not kill each other that day
Mm-hmm.
and communicate. But just to wrap up here, let's quickly, we'll skip 2 of the YDP3. We'll wrap back to those. But normally the YDP3 is 3 questions. Where are you rooted? What grounds you? But I guess here the one that we ask all guests is,
I can do those real quick. I can do those real quick.
okay. So where are you rooted?
Okay.
What grounds you? And then the third one is, what advice do you have for a struggling mom or struggling parent that's in a really dark place to help them start to come out of that?
Okay. I'm rooted in my home with my family amongst the trees of Colorado. What grounds me is soul, like connecting with my soul and the deeper journey and the mission for being here. And what advice I have for struggling moms and dads is that you're not alone in the struggle. Like, if anyone's telling you that they're not being stretched and grown as a parent, they're lying to you or they're lying to themselves. And that if we can just shift our expectations of what it means to be a parent, which is usually it's not how you thought it would be, and it's like growing and stretching you, like your kids will help you grow outside your comfort zones, and that it's
100%.
like not only is it okay, but it's powerful and protective of your children to create containers of support for yourself. Like, you have a financial advisor and a banker to manage your money. Like, why would we not have like coaches and containers of support and put intentionality behind how we grow and how we're being in our parenting? So I'm super passionate about that. And I don't think it has to be like an hourly paid parent coach or even like the most expensive course. It could be listening to podcasts or having a journal where you reflect on your parenting each day, but bringing some intentionality and creating containers of support for the spoke on your wheel of humanity that is parenting, to me is like drinking water and essential.
I love that. I love that. Well, Sophie, thank you so much for the conversation today, for the insight, for going into highly sensitive children, conscious parenting, and for sharing more about yourself and your journey. And it was a pleasure having you. Super grateful. So thank you for the time. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. It's amazing what you're doing, and to be a dad that's emotionally aware and doing your own work and growing in this way, and then also serving your community is such a beautiful thing. So I'm sure that your daughters are super proud daughters, even when they're grumpy. And at the end of the day, like, yeah, just really see you as an amazing dad, and it's awesome to connect. And I hope maybe you can come on our podcast sometime. And yeah, just awesome to
Love
connect
to.
here. Thank you so much.
Love to. All right, audience, do your thing. We'll be back next week.